talking about this first guy from Frankfurt says, Carl, I love your segments on Louisville Live this morning. Good job. I was driving in our first real snow and a car hit me. I pulled off to the side of the road and the driver who hit me sped off. That's terrible. I called the police. They said there wasn't much they could do. Well, is there anything you can do?
Well, hopefully if there is a hit and run, obviously that is illegal to do that. And if they can be found, they can be arrested for that. And so obviously if there's any way to, when that happens, to identify the car or license plate number or something. But if you're injured in a hit and run accident, actually, and this is why it's important to have adequate insurance coverage on your car, because you could make what's called an uninsured motorist claim.
Right.
So if someone hits you and takes off, then you can file a claim under your own insurance company if you're hurt. Of course, if you're not hurt and it's just property damage, you would have to file it under, if you have uninsured motorist or property damage coverage, or your collision coverage would pay for your property damage. But if you're hurt, you can make a claim under your uninsured motorist coverage, because that does cover hit and run drivers.
Okay, still taking your phone calls for Carl, 502-276-2118. Carl's here to answer all the questions. I have a question myself. If you're behind someone with the ice that we've had recently, and you're a good distance behind them like you should be, and they stop pretty abruptly, and you stop but you kind of slide into them, is that still, how does that work out?
Well, that's a tough question too, because your duty when you're behind someone, you have an obligation to maintain a safe following distance. And of course, that safe distance can depend on the road conditions and environmental factors and speed and a lot of different things.
Okay.
So generally speaking, I mean, as a general rule, if you hit someone in the rear, you're probably going to be at fault. Now, there could be an exception if someone is in front of you and they just suddenly stop for no reason. Then they could create what's called a sudden emergency scenario for you. But as a general rule, if you're behind someone, it's your obligation to keep a safe distance. And so if that means that the roads are slick, you have to stay farther back.
Okay, this is not a personal experience.
No. I've seen some close calls. I've seen some close calls, and I just kind of wondered, gosh, if I really wasn't, on my ball and paying attention, how would that work out? So I'm glad Carl's here.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Carl, you're going to stay with us through the break?
Can you?
Sure.
All right.
We have several more emails and a couple of calls, too.
Yes, 502-276-2118. Carl Truman is here to answer your legal questions.
Excellent.
Great.
Carl, stay with us. We've got a couple more items in the mailbag. Questions that you may have, dial 276-2118 for Karl Truman, injury lawyer. He can answer all of your questions about personal injury, motor vehicle, Social Security, workers' comp, and medical malpractice.
And welcome back. We have Karl Truman, the injury lawyer here.
Whose
on
ice
Louisville
scraper
Live.
you used this morning?
I used his ice scraper. Listen, those are good things. I got one last year, I got one this year.
I don't think
I keep
you
it
have
right
any
in my
left,
glove.
do you?
We're probably about out. I mean, we've had a bunch of calls for those, and yeah, we've been really sending them out. And,
Awesome.
yeah, it's been a popular item.
And the number to dial is 276-2118, and actually somebody's calling us right now.
We have Thomas from Louisville on the phone to ask Karl a question. Thomas, you there?
Yes.
All right, Karl's listening to you.
Okay. Well, my question was, like when you're driving and, like, say on the expressway, and someone jumps over in front of you and causes you to hit them in the back, does that still mean that you're at fault when they just kind of jump in front of you in between two cars?
Wow.
And you don't really have the time to react to them?
Yeah, that
a
is
good
a
question.
a bad situation. Actually, almost happened to me on the highway the other day. 'Cause one of the things that I always am very cautious of, let's say if you're on a 3-lane road and you're merging from one lane to the middle lane, and somebody else is merging in the middle lane at the same time. Well, I was actually on the road and I was merging to the middle lane. You know, I had my turn signal on and looked, and it was clear, and I moved over, and someone in the far left-hand lane just shot over.
Yes.
I mean, he was like inches from my bumper.
That's
And it was, you know, I had to hit the brakes. I mean, it was close to being a really horrible situation. But if someone cuts over like that, I mean, it is their fault. I mean, that would be negligence on their part if they just cut over. You know, the problem, of course, that sometimes comes in is when they do that and they hit you, are they going to be truthful about it? You know, are they going to try to say, oh, well, no, you're the one that came over? So that's why sometimes it's really important to have independent eyewitnesses who can say, well, who cut into who? Because, you know, sometimes people are honest about it, and they'll say, I've actually seen police reports where people have admitted, well, yeah, I didn't see them or I didn't look before I moved over. But oftentimes people will not want to tell the truth, and they'll say, oh, no, they cut over into me and it was really their fault.
Right.
And then you run into a situation, well, it's, you know, your word against theirs and trying to prove who really is at fault. And that can be difficult without witnesses.
Can you imagine how shocking it would be to be in a car accident and realize that the person that you had hit was Karl Truman, injury lawyer?
Better watch out.
That would be a shock.
You better watch out there when you're speeding. We're still taking your phone calls, 502-276-2118. Karl Truman's here to answer your legal questions. We also get emails from time to time. You can also email us live at WBKI.TV. We have an email from Sarah in Floyd's Knobs. Sarah says, over the holiday, I was laid off. I don't think I did anything wrong, but my employer said they don't have to give me a reason. This seems like it's against the law. Is this true?
Well, as a general rule, in both Indiana and Kentucky, we are both states are what's called employment at will.
Yes.
So unless you have an employment contract or perhaps a union agreement or some other type of employment agreement, an employer can fire you for any reason or no reason at all. We particularly run into this sometimes in workers' compensation situations where, you know, someone will get hurt on the job, and then the employer says, well, you can't do your job anymore, you know, I'm firing you. Now, the law does say that they can't fire you in retaliation for making a workers' compensation claim, although sometimes that's tough to prove that it was actually in retaliation, unless they actually say that, oh, well, you know, if you make a claim, I'm going to fire you. But otherwise, workers' compensation does not even protect your job. You know, but if you do, there could be other protections under Family Medical Leave Act or Americans with Disabilities Act, but unfortunately, if an employer wants to come in and just say, I don't like you anymore, go home, they're legally allowed to do that.
I think you need to talk to Karl Truman about that in more detail, Sarah, by the way. 1-800-ACCIDENT or TrumanLaw.com is also a good way to get in touch with Karl. If you have questions right now, dial in at 276-2118. Let's go ahead and do that third email because that fascinates me. This is from Taylor in Louisville. I'm a manic depressive and have serious mood swings at work and at home. My employer let me go, and they said they couldn't count on me to be sane at work. I'm currently trying to get on better medications with my doctors, but I don't think I've been given a fair shot. Can I get disability? Is this protected by the Americans with Disabilities Act, Carl?
Right, there's a couple aspects with that question. I mean, first of all, they're more concerned about if they could get Social Security disability. Certainly, it's possible to get disability for a mental impairment, you know, if they're not able to provide any gainful employment.
Sure. At
the workplace, under the Americans with Disabilities Act, the employer is required to make what's called a reasonable accommodation for someone with a physical disability. Now, what is reasonable? That's kind of tough. There's no black and white answer for that. It's kind of tough because it depends on a case-by-case scenario.
Very
what is
subjective.
reasonable, right? And what is reasonable in one company might not be reasonable in another company. But the place for more information about the Americans with Disabilities Act, that's enforced by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC. You can go to their website, you can contact them, but if you do feel that there's a violation of the ADA law, you have to initiate that by first making a complaint with the EEOC, just as you would in any other discrimination claim, whether it's, you know, sex, race, age, that type of discrimination complaint.
Got it.
You can find out more information at trumanlaw.com or call Carl at 1-800-ACCIDENT. Carl, you specialize in so many different areas. Practice areas include medical malpractice, motor vehicle accidents, like we were talking about earlier, personal injury law, Social Security law, workers' compensation, all sorts of good stuff.
The Kentucky Bar Association doesn't like it when we use the word specialize in.
Okay.
So I do have to follow the ethics rules on that, even though I am board certified as a civil trial lawyer. But the bar doesn't want me to use the word specialist.
Well, you are in Louisville and in Jeffersonville, which means you can practice in both states, which is a huge advantage since we do so much of our traveling back and forth over the river.
That's true. I do both states, and that's important. When you're in an accident, you want to make sure that the lawyer is licensed to practice in your state.
That's right. TrumanLaw.com or just dial 1-800-ACCIDENT for Karl Truman.